The Founding Fathers gave us our Constitution and our treasured First Amendment. But did they give us freedom? The answer is no. Our freedom comes from God. So how should we view separation of church and state? That's coming up next as Arkansas Live starts right now. You know, you might be thinking, recalling the words, I think Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death. Liberty and freedom are not the same. Your freedoms come from God. Liberty comes from war, fighting, resolution. Liberty comes from compromise. Liberty. If our freedom came from any other source than God, then whatever source it came from could rescind it. If freedom comes from government, then government can take it away. I think I was reading after somebody that said a democracy, the longest lasting democracy, said democracies don't really last longer than 200 or 300 years because when they find out that they can appropriate funds, vote themselves, funds and whatever, it's the democracy self-destructs. Well, we're there now. Our freedom comes from God. Now, let me read to you, I said I was going to read to you the 5 freedoms that contained in the First Amendment. And then I want to show you a video that we got permission from CBN to run on homeschooling. The first of the 5 freedoms that we retain, that we got from the First Amendment, is freedom of religion. To worship God according to the dictates of conscience. And this is all found in Scripture. When we get to it, we'll read it, Romans 13. The right to free exercise of religion. The right to express our faith openly, publicly. Religion is essential. You know, the government tried to tell us the church was an essential activity. Well, those that shut down their churches now, you have seen that they were essential, but because they were shut down, we got all kinds of problems. I pass a small church, I won't mention the denomination, on my way to the office, the studio every day. I pass this church, and Jeannie and I have watched it. We've prayed for it because it's a nice church and a believing church, and usually the parking lot was full on Sunday mornings. And the people were, enjoying all of the things that constitute enjoying from a church. But after a year of being shut down, there are no cars in the parking lot. Now, they have on their marquee out front, we are still here, but it's all virtual learning. It's all by computer. It's all by social media. They're not meeting in the church. Why? Because the government says church was not essential. It is essential. And we have First Amendment freedoms that tell us that it is essential and cannot be shut down. Now, I want to make clear you understand, you can certainly honor governmental requests for the sake of health in the state, etc. But make no mistake about it, you're honoring the request of the governor or the state or the health department to practice social distancing, the wearing of masks, etc. All that is voluntary. They can't force you to do that. They cannot force a church to shut down. They cannot force a religious activity to be canceled. It is essential for the well-being of humankind. So, we've been granted the freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. We each have the freedom to live out our chosen faith or no faith at all. I mean, if you choose to be an atheist, an agnostic, and you don't even want to go to church, don't believe, that's your right too. Respect the rights of fellow Americans to live out their beliefs as well. Now, this is hard sometimes because, as Christians, we want everybody to be a Christian, we want everybody to believe like we believe and believe according to the Bible, but everybody doesn't and everybody won't. In other words, you can say it this way. This is not intended to be harsh or judgmental. Every individual has the right to choose whom they worship. Every person, every individual has the right to choose heaven or hell. Now, I say that not to be judgmental, but the Scripture says if you believe upon the Son of God, Jesus the Messiah, the Christ, and you confess with your heart, you'll be saved and you'll go to heaven. But if you don't, if you reject and refuse, you go to hell. That's not my judgment, my words. That's what the Bible says. So people have the right to go to hell if they want to. They won't like it when they get there, according to the Scriptures, but they have the right to. So freedom of religion was the first freedom contained in the First Amendment. Secondly, freedom of speech. We can say whatever we want, even if it's unpopular, even if it sounds critical to the government, even if it sounds unpatriotic, we have the right to say it. You know, one of the hardest times that I had to deal with a few years ago was when people were burning the American flag on the Capitol steps and encouraging other people to do the same. And sometimes people are so stupid to follow a leader who is stupid. And it kind of scratches a rebellion spark in them. Oh, good, I've been wanting to do that, so I'm going to join them. It was hard for me because having served the military myself and having taken an oath, protect this country from all enemies and to uphold the Constitution, it was hard for me to sit by and watch stupid people burning the American flag on the Capitol steps. When we pledged allegiance to that flag and we served our country to protect it from all foreign enemies, to burn the flag, you just wanted to go up there and slap somebody upside the head and then ask God to forgive you later. I'll tell you something else that I maybe shouldn't say this, but, if you want to send me an ugly email or a letter, that's fine. I can handle it. I've got a file that I file all those type things in. But it just really, now I served in the Navy for a total of 6 years, 2 years at sea on 2 different warships. And we worked with the Marines. We took boot camp right across the fence at Camp Pendleton, Camp Nimitz. And, the Marines are a branch of the Navy, and we, worked together in so many campaigns and whatever. And it just, I don't understand why the USMC doesn't say something or do something about this television program. Of course, the television program was made back in the 50s. Gomer Pyle, USMC. And Gomer Pyle, played by Jim Nabors. Jim Nabors was a professed homosexual. And I don't understand why they don't say something, do something about that. It's an insult to the Marine Corps for a homosexual actor to represent a Marine. When the NAACP rose up and didn't like the radio program and television program later, Amos and Andy, they thought it was degrading to the black race. They got it taken off the air. Well, why don't the Marines stand up and do something and say, this is ridiculous. We object to this type of portrayal of some stupid, bumbling idiot that is going to, be representative of the Marine Corps. Now, that's my soapbox. I'll get off of it right now. But they have the right to say these things. They have the freedom of speech. And that's why people in Hollywood, New York, all these producers and whatever, that's why they've been able to make all these TV programs and movies that slap at our country and our armed services and so forth. We can say whatever we want, even if it's unpopular, because we're guaranteed that freedom of speech by the First Amendment. Freedom of the press. We get to choose from a free market competition of news outlets rather than a state-controlled media. I'm kind of laughing at that because I know that's what freedom of the press is, but when it says rather than a state-controlled media, the media is controlled by the state and by, how would I say, it's controlled by money. It's controlled by organizations that control the content and direct the insults. And it's mostly by money, and it's mostly by large corporations. Just keep in mind that the news programs that you see and many of the programs that you see on television are sponsored programs. They are sponsored by corporations and entities, big corporations, big money, and that news director, news media, better not deviate from their so-called controlled agenda, or they'll be, out of a job. But freedom of the press, we get to choose. I choose VTN. I choose watching Christian programming, watching Christian news. We have a free press. We get to choose from a free market competition of news rather than state-controlled media. Now, to give you an example, let's take China, for example. Their media is state-controlled. The media in China only presents media that the state approves of. Freedom of assembly. Now, here we go. We have the right to gather, assemble, to worship as we choose, and even to speak out against actions of the government when we disagree. Pastors, are you listening to this? You don't have to be afraid anymore to stand up. Let me just tell you something. I get emails and letters from some of your church members that say, why won't my pastor stand up and talk about this? They want you to talk about it, pastors. They want you to address these issues. They want you to address them. They want you to teach them to the congregation. Freedom of assembly. You have the right to do this. The government cannot take you down, shut your church, take you out of the pulpit, arrest you. Now, they can in other nations and have. But in America, as long as we are still honoring the Constitution, we have the right of the freedom of assembly. And last, the freedom of petition. Our right to petition our government can mean a letter to our congressman or to the editor or a march in Washington, D.C. We have these rights. These rights are part of the First Amendment to our Constitution. So, as we look at separation of church and state, we just dealt with the state first of all. Separation of church and state. That phrase is taken out of a letter that was written to Danbury Baptist by Thomas Jefferson. He talked about a wall of separation. The actual intent of Jefferson's remarks was to comfort the Danbury Baptist and try to get them to understand this wall of separation is to keep the state out of your religion, to keep the state out of your church, not the other way around. It's not designed to keep the church out of the state. It's designed to keep the state out of the church. But so few citizens know this, and they don't teach this in American history anymore. I wouldn't think they would, because the state public schools, the state schools and colleges and universities have an agenda, and that's to demoralize the students and produce an ungodly generation of students. So let's go now to this piece from CBN about homeschooling. I think this will help you. Watch this, and I'll be right back.
The COVID-19 pandemic hit our educational system hard, and one of the major effects came in homeschooling. A census report found homeschooling doubled during COVID. Here with us for more on that and how parents can be prepared for homeschooling is Ann Miller, the Executive Director of the Home Educators Association of Virginia. Thank you so much for being here. So tell us more about how COVID affected homeschooling. What changes did we see as a result?
Well, your reference to the census was remarkable in that homeschooling for the 2021 school year doubled. An interesting fact that U.S. Census found, and that census was also just released in March, they also found that the number of Black or African American families increased 5 times.
Wow.
Which is amazing, because in homeschooling, there's long been a stigma against homeschooling in some Black communities. But homeschooling, Black children are thriving, and research shows that they're 42 percentile points ahead in language arts and 26 percentile points ahead in math scores compared to public school students, homeschool Black students. So we're just seeing people understanding the benefits of home education and the growth, and we see the Lord turning the hearts of the parents to the children, and they want to do what's right for their kids, and they're finding that homeschooling has been a tremendous option. Here in Virginia, our homeschooling has increased 48%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, children, of course, have been taught because of the school shutdowns. How is this different from the virtual learning many families have experienced over the last year?
Yeah, well, virtual learning can actually be a component of home education. Okay. Home education is really about parent-directed, parent-led education, so parents can use whatever works for their kids. And homeschooling also, as it's a wonderful way to disciple our children. And there's a battle raging for the hearts and the minds of our kids.
Absolutely.
And it's an opportunity for parents to instill their values and their beliefs, as well as academics. Homeschoolers, the research shows they do phenomenally well academically. But homeschooling, Ephraim, is about so much more than just academics. And for those who are worried, colleges love homeschoolers. Every homeschool parent, whether they have a preschooler and they want to know, can my kid get into college?
Absolutely.
And we do an annual convention, and we have over 12,000 people who attend every year. And the college fair part, the preschool parents are there like, can my kids get into college? Colleges actually are recruiting homeschoolers, and we have one college that told us that they are putting their marketing budget into recruiting homeschoolers because they've changed the atmosphere on their campus.
Oh, wow.
So the results speak for themselves, and but in the end, homeschooling is about a lot more than academics. It's about relationships. It's about relationships with our children, with each other, and ultimately our relationship with the Lord. And so parents have that opportunity through educating their children at home to disciple them in the ways of the Lord, and also the world becomes your classroom.
Yes, indeed.
It's age-integrated learning in kind of an outside-the-box way.
I love it. So you can take education on the road with you if necessary.
Yeah, road schooling is actually a thing. Well, the world does become your classroom. Indeed. And you're not limited to a set of textbooks or a certain curriculum, and struggling learners, homeschooling is especially good for struggling learners because parents can remediate, and that's one thing that parents found out from COVID.
Yeah.
They didn't know why their kids were struggling in school, and they were involved parents, and then they found out, they don't know their math facts.
Yeah.
So they were able to stop everything, remediate, and let them catch up, mastery learning.
Love it. Before we let you go, we're just about out of time. You got a conference coming up, Homeschooling with Confidence, Unstoppable.
Yes.
Tell us who this is for and why it's important right now.
This is for any parent or grandparent who's interested in teaching and training their children at home. And the conference is filled with practical, relevant tips, ideas, out of the box, helping parents think outside the box about education, because we're used to one model of education, and homeschooling is a completely different model. So we want to equip and encourage parents to have the confidence to teach their children.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Ann Miller. Confidence is what we need, because I know I'm a parent as well, and I didn't think I was qualified to homeschool until this last year.
Yes, most parents don't, but it grows us as well, but it's a wonderful thing, and there is, it's so important for today because there is a battle for the hearts and the minds of our children. and we don't want them to become collateral damage.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I want to let you know at home that you can find out more about going to the homeschooling.
And it's free.
And it's free.
all free.
Very good.
How did I forget that? It is all free.
Go to homeschoolingwithconfidence.org. You can find it. As you just heard, it is all free. Thank you so much, Ann. Much appreciated.
You are very welcome.
Our thanks to CBN for allowing us to re-air that interview. I want to encourage those of you that are frustrated with the educational facilities in our country today and what they're being taught or not being taught. Homeschool your children. You heard that homeschooling is up almost 50%, almost doubled to what it was for different various reasons, but it's still on the increase. And colleges and universities love homeschooler graduates. Plus, if you can't homeschool, our church has an academy, Agape Academy, which is an excellent Christian educational facility. And our students, they score on the ACT tests 2 and 3 years beyond public schools, or maybe even more than that. And we've had many students that graduate, go on to college, and wind up being professionals. And so I would encourage you to do that. Find out what it costs to put them in Christian school, or homeschool them yourself, because we've got to change the attitude. You heard the interview there. It's not just about history and reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's about attitude. It's about relationships. And we've got to create a new generation to come into our community today. So I want to encourage you in that area too. Okay, let's go to Romans chapter 13, and let's continue for the rest of the week on separation of the church. Now, we talked about separation of the church and state, but let's talk about separation of the church. And let me give you the definition of separation. You can apply it to separation of church and state and to just the separation of the church. The word separation means to set off by a boundary, to limit, to exclude, to divide, to sever. It means a separation. Let's look at Romans 13 and verses 1 through 14. And we talked a little bit about this when we were reading the Constitution, Bill of Rights, freedoms of the 5 freedoms of the Bill of Rights, First Amendment, excuse me. Romans 13, verse 1, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God or ordered of God. So every power, every authority we have in the earth today, whether it's government, whether it's spiritual, physical, financial, laws of gravity, everything is subject to God Himself. He created and ordered these powers. Now, He didn't set people in public office. You do that by your vote. But let's go on reading. There's no power but of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall to themselves receive damnation. Rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and you'll have praise of the same. For He, the power, authority of God, is the minister of God to you for good. Did you get that? He is the minister of God to you for good. But if you do that which is evil, be afraid. I remember my parents taught me as a boy that police officers were my friends. They were there to protect me from evil. They were there to take care of me, to help me. Now, as a young boy growing up in the 40s and 50s, I took that to heart. I remember one time my mother, she had to go downtown, Little Rock. I probably wasn't even in school, maybe 5 or 6 years old. But I had been taught this. And so we went downtown. She had to go into a store, and she told me to stay in the car. And as it turned out, I got concerned about her. She was in there longer, and I got out of the car, which she told me not to do. And I got out, and I got lost downtown. You can imagine a little 5-year-old boy downtown Little Rock, and this was back in the late 40s. And or early 50s, and I was about to panic, and I saw a police officer standing on the corner twirling his billy club. And I walked up to him. Now, this is based on what my mother and daddy taught me. I walked up to him, and I pulled on his jacket, his uniform coat, and he turned around, and I said, "Pardon me, sir. My mother is lost. Can you help me find her?" When it was me that was lost. But he looked at me and grinned, and he was standing right beside a phone on the street there that they called police. He called police headquarters. They sent a car, picked me up, and took me to the police headquarters. And from there, they found out I was apparently old enough to tell them my name and my father's name and where he worked, and they called him on the phone and said, "We have your son. He was lost downtown, and would you come pick him up?" And my father did. Of course, my mother was frantic. She came out and I was gone, but cut to the chase, cut to the end of the story. It had a good ending because I was told that the police officers were my friend, and they were there to help me. This says these rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. So I want you to know that, and we'll pick this up here tomorrow. Will then you not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good and have praise of the same. For he is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do that which is evil, be afraid, because he bears not the sword in vain. So we're going to pick this up tomorrow. We're talking about the separation of the church. God created civil government. You put people in office, but all the powers were ordained or ordered of God. So everything comes from God, but God has a perfect way for this to all work together. And that's what we're going to look at tomorrow on tomorrow's Arkansas Alive. Remember, Jesus is Lord of Arkansas, and wherever you're watching, too.
Send your questions, comments, and testimonies to Happy Caldwell at Post Office Box 26207, Little Rock, Arkansas 72221, or email happycaldwell@vtntv.com. Remember to follow VTN on Facebook at VTN Your Arkansas Christian Connection, and follow Happy Caldwell on Twitter at Happy_Caldwell. VTN is on Roku. Search VTN in the channel store and add us to your lineup. Today's episode is available to watch on demand at VTNTV.com and click Watch. You can also watch VTN via live stream at VTNTV.com.